Hi, Benir.
Hello, how are you?
Thank you for doing this interview with me today and sharing your terrific, terrific story, your awesome story.
Yeah.
There is a lot that you have, just thrived through.
I'm
So,
thriving now, but then I wouldn't consider it thriving.
so, for women that just feel like they're having one strange or negative episode or one hurdle after another. You're a prime example of if you keep your head up and you keep pressing and you keep going, that you will be successful, that your dreams
Absolutely.
will begin to unfold. Because yours started the day you were born.
Yeah.
How did that happen? How did you spend a week in the bayou?
Yeah. So, um, if you've seen any of my interviews, of course, you know that my mom and I didn't always have the best relationship. And so she actually had me very young. She got pregnant at 15, had me at 16. And nobody knew that she was pregnant. She didn't really have a support system. And back then, it was kind of this you don't really talk about what's going on
Mhm.
thing. There weren't really a lot of medical resources. And so the morning I was born, she gave birth all by herself, 16-year-old, scared little girl. And she didn't really know what her options were. And so she put me in a duffel bag and walked to the bayou, because of course we lived in New Orleans. So she walked to the bayou and put me in a hole. And I'm told that she prayed that another family would find me, that someone who could take care of me would find me. Um, and then a week later, someone did. Yeah, so
And
I'm told, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, because I want the rest of the story.
Yeah. So I've never really the full story. Of course, I've read the newspaper articles, but it's kind of like this family myth that's circulating. But I've been told that every morning before she went to school, she would come and feed me. When they found me, I only had mosquito bites. There was nothing else physically wrong with me. They could tell that someone had been watching over me. Around the time they found me, she went to the hospital because she failed to deliver the afterbirth. Because, of course, she's 16 years old, gave birth by herself. She didn't know. Um, and so they put two and two together and realized we have this baby without a mother, and we have a mother who clearly has just had a baby who's claiming she was never pregnant. So, I'm not really sure all of the legalities that happened, but I did end up back with my mom. I grew
Wow.
Yeah, and that started a very long story of survival.
So, okay, that's birth, which is
Mhm.
because as you grow, kind of like being on a track field and
Mhm.
where you're doing maybe the 400-meter hurdles. Every couple of steps or every couple of years, there's another gigantic stressful. Not they
Right.
Psychiatrists say that moving, losing a relative, those things of those nature are extremely stressful,
Mhm.
but they haven't heard our stories.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
continue through and walk us through,
Mhm.
and then I want to know the epiphany behind the name of the coaching program.
Okay. Okay. So taking you through, like you said, it definitely, it's funny because sometimes when I speak with people, I feel like I'm talking about someone else. This life seems so far removed from where I am today. And I'm so grateful because there were so many times going through it that I definitely thought I would not make it through. And so being able to look back and tell my story from a place of victory, from a place of overcoming, it really is incredible to me, you know. But so, you know, of course, that was birth. My family moved from New Orleans to Seattle, 4 or 5 years old. And honestly, after that, we probably moved every year, went to a different school every year. When I was about 6 years old, I was molested. We moved into a new complex. And there was a girl that was my friend. And, you know, my mom, again, single mom, at this point, she had 4 children. So there were 4 of us by the time she was 21 years old. And so she was working 2, 3 jobs most of our life. And, you know, when she wasn't working multiple jobs, she was in school. So I kind of raised myself and my siblings for a good part of our life. You know, I was babysitting by the time I was 6 years old. And so there was a girl in the neighborhood who molested me for about a year. Never told anyone about it until I was late into my teens, but I definitely started feeling the effects of it much sooner than that.
Do you remember who the first person was that you told?
I want to say it was my mom. But she didn't believe me. And I realized when I told her, like I said, I was 16 years old. I had left home by then. And so I'm sure that there was a lot more of concern than just the fact that I had been molested when I was a child. And so that part kind of got swept under the rug. Um, but, you know, by then, again, when I was 6 years old, we were already being physically and emotionally abused. And so when it happened, I knew that I couldn't tell anyone. I knew that if I said something, I was going to get a whipping because it was my fault. I probably shouldn't have hung out with her. There were so many things that I probably shouldn't have done. You know, I should have known better. All of these things that we place on ourselves, which at 6 years old, how would I have known? But I didn't know. So
But that's the classic story. That story and where first we blame ourselves,
right.
then when we do get the voice to actually speak and tell somebody, we're
Mm-hmm.
not believed.
Right.
So
Right.
right now,
Mm-hmm.
if there is a young lady that is watching this that is having that experience or has had that experience but never said it aloud to anyone, what would you
Mm-hmm.
say to her right now?
Get help. There's nothing that you possibly could have done. You know, I always, of course, that's what I do now, right, is help abuse survivors. And so I always, you know, you could be walking down Fifth Street naked. There's nothing that you can do that makes it okay for another person to hurt you. And so knowing that, what does happen though is when we realize that this affected our life in whatever way and we don't get help, then we continue to hurt ourselves. They've hurt us and moved on. But when we realize that it's affecting us, and abuse has lifelong effects. And that's why I do what I do, because the effects are lifelong. And so once you realize that it's affecting your life in any way, get help. It doesn't matter if you're 55 years old and it happened when you were in elementary school. Get the help that you need. Speak to that. The rest of your years can really be the best of your life.
So you can get to a point to where you can let go
Mm-hmm.
and move
Absolutely.
past it emotionally.
Absolutely.
Not just that time passes, because time doesn't heal all wounds. It's
And a
actually
lot of times we get stuck in this cycle of being a survivor. And I think that's the story of a lot of Black women. You know, I'm a survivor, I made it through whatever. And it's like, yeah, you survived it, but you're still just surviving. There's so much more to life than just surviving.
okay. When you said you left home at 16,
Hmm.
you left home and
Um, so at that time, at about 16, I had already tried to kill myself twice. I had started cutting myself when I was 10 years old. And so around 16 was when I realized for myself, wow, I'm in crisis. You know, this is not normal. I would go through, and I was the shining star. I was a straight A student. I was in every extracurricular activity. If I wasn't at school, I was at work or I was at church. I was looking from the outside in. I was that model student. Um, but I did not care. I had already gotten a full ride scholarship to Howard, and I didn't even care if I lived to the next day. And I think the only reason I even chose Howard at that time is because it was so far away from
Mm-hmm.
Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to realize around that time that, wow, my life really is in crisis. And I think I want to die, but it's not that I want to die. I just don't want to live in this pain. And so that was immediately after my second suicide attempt. And came home and dealt with my mom saying how weak I was and all of these things. And I think around that time, again, I just realized life doesn't actually have to be this way. There are alternatives. And so I went and I stayed with a friend of mine who went to my church, stayed with her for about a month. And then the pastor, she was a foster parent, and so the pastor said that I couldn't stay there. And so I ended up living with my pastor and his wife for about a year. I lived there until I went to college.
Okay. So with your first and second attempt,
hmm
what was the reaction from your family?
Um, and I will give the disclaimer that, we only can do what we know with the resources that we have,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of times when I talk about my past, it seems like I'm villainizing my family.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely isn't that. But I didn't have the resources that I needed,
It's
And
it's
so,
a it's just a statement of fact of
mhm,
the environment and the sociological factors that were in place at that time.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So the first time and I'm sorry, I kind of chuckled because again, I look back on it and it's like, is this real life?
Yeah.
The first time I actually took some borax rat poison with some Kool-Aid. I mixed up a really tall glass. And about half an hour afterwards, I was on the line with a friend of mine from church because church was so important to my life back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to hell. Like, so I'm like, Joy. And so she asked what happened, and, it took a while for me to tell her, but I finally told her. My pastor got involved, and so, he woke my mom up, and that was a foiled attempt, of course. They reached out to the crisis center, but there still was a lack of understanding. And of course, at this point, no one knew that I had been molested, and no one outside of my family knew that we had been being physically or verbally abused. And so
Because one of the
I,
things that I want um, women to hear, and if any young girls or teen girls watch this, what I really want them to get from this is that you're reacting to everything, but the people outside of
mhm,
you are only reacting to the crisis because
right,
they don't know the real reason of why. They don't know the file folder. All they
mhm,
see is the yellow on the outside.
exactly, absolutely,
So, as coaches, as counselors, articulating it and saying it is
absolutely.
one of the greatest things that you can do. Even if you just write it all down on a
hmm
piece of paper and carry that paper with you, getting it out
hmm
is the most important thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was the first time. And, and then the pastor uh, actually joked about it in church. They called me up to the prayer line and he told me that I wasn't a rat. And so I should not do that. And so that was kind of the end of it. And really, honestly, all that taught me was next time, just don't say anything. Next time, I need to be more careful, And so the second time I actually overdosed on pills. And it was just like Advil or something over the counter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and several days later, my mom found out, and her response was the next time I wanted to do it, that I should let her know so that I was not causing issues in the family, basically, so that I could take them out of this hamster wheel of Benir's always in crisis. Just let her know so that she could tell me how to effectively do it. And so that was the attempt that, after everything had kind of boiled over with that, I realized I can't continue like this. I will
Any
be successful in hurting myself. Sorry, go ahead.
in either of those two events, did you ever go to the hospital?
I went to the hospital the second time, but it was several days after, and so I was fine. They just, I did see a counselor after that. That's actually when I started seeing a counselor, and I saw a counselor until I went to college. Yeah, yeah.
And
So,
that process helped?
um, honestly,
Yes.
not really.
Right.
Only because, I didn't have the family support. I felt like, and it wasn't until, because there was a final attempt, which I'll tell you about in a moment, but it wasn't until that final attempt where I started to see that I have to have all of the pieces in place. And so, I went to counseling and they just kind of put me on medication. Um, and we talked about the surface things. We talked about, again, people see the crisis. So we talked about what was on the outside of the envelope, but never ever talked about why. And so when the what was on the outside was resolved, which most of that was me living at home, when that part was resolved, I still had the depression, but then for outside view, it looked like there was no reason because it's like you're not in an unstable environment anymore.
You're a
Now
straight
you're
A
safe.
student.
You have a full ride to Howard. What's wrong with you? What could possibly be wrong with you? Yeah.
Because
you know.
they're unaware that everything that you're now reacting to has happened over the last
hmm
decade.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. Absolutely.
and a lot of the times, if you're speaking with a counselor that is educated in the area but doesn't have any personal experience in the area, then they don't know what to ask.
Right. You're right. You're right. And around that, like I said, my whole life was in crisis around that time. Um, I had been bulimic for several years, but that was around when it started to come out. And for everyone else, because I was always a big child. I graduated high school at 300 pounds. Again, sign of crisis, right? But for everyone else, it was, oh, you must be doing that because you don't like being chubby, because you don't like being fat. And it's like, I mean, that may be a very tiny part of it, but let's look at why it's happening
Right.
in the first place,
Right.
you know?
That's
And
still surface layer.
hmm hmm
Mhm.
Yeah, and I feel like so often we treat the symptoms
Yes.
without getting to the root, without, just going in and pulling up the weeds from the root. And because I, at that time, was so involved in church, I thought I knew God. And I thought, my understanding of God was how the pastor interpreted the Bible for me. And I saw God as unforgiving. I saw God as, every time that I had tried to harm myself in the past,
Mhm.
my first thought was, oh my God, I'm going to hell now. Like, forget about the pain I've been in. Forget about, I'm going to hell. God, please forgive me, And I think that I had this very unrealistic relationship with God. And it wasn't until I got to Howard. And again, I mean, my freshman year, I think for me was just an excuse. I was away from everyone, so I could be as depressed as I was, and no one knew. And so, for me, it was just getting away from anyone who knew me. And so, my final attempt, I actually have a blog post on my site called Conversations with God that talks about it. But essentially, I overdosed on some pills and Tanqueray, and I slept for 3 days. And during those 3 days, I felt like I was sitting beside God. The first day, kind of just looking at myself like, girl, what did you do? you know. But over the course of those 3 days, my wanting to leave this space of pain changed to I will go through it because I know that there's a purpose. I know that I could have been dead from birth, but there's a reason that I'm still here. And God, if you just promise that you will walk beside me and that you will guide me and that I will actually have a real relationship with you and not just what I've been taught to have in church, if you promise that you will walk beside me, I will never, ever think that this gift you gave me is worthless. I think for me, it was that experience that gave me the epiphany. Like, who am I to be so arrogant to think that this gift you've given me of life is even mine to take? And that was when things started to change for me. That was when I did seek counseling again, but this time I understood why I needed to be in counseling. And counseling itself was not particularly the key, but it certainly helped me see value in myself so that I could start to find the keys to get better.
You mentioned that you started cutting yourself at 10.
hmm
And then at what age did you stop?
About 23.
Okay, so you were well into Howard at this time.
Yeah.
Did any of
Oh,
your
yeah.
classmates ever notice anything?
Um, I don't think so, but honestly, I was
Yeah.
so oblivious at that time.
But I mean,
Like,
did they say anything to you
right.
about it?
Not without me first bringing it up. I mean, even now, I have over 100 scars on my arm. I have scars all over my legs. So, in my memory, and again, that time is kind of cloudy, I don't remember anyone saying anything that they could actively see. Anything that they saw were scars that had been there. Yeah, it was very discreet, which at that time it was actually something that I was proud of. And now I just want to hug myself and say, girl, like, they will not judge you. People who care about you will help you get the help you need, you know. But that at that time, a lot of people think that people who harm themselves do it for attention. People who try to commit suicide do it for attention. That is the furthest thing from truth.
Yes.
And I went to every extreme to hide it so that people didn't know. And so for me, it was certainly never a way um, to get attention. So, to answer your question, I'm sure that there were some people who noticed, but certainly never anyone who noticed while I was in crisis.
Because people like to think that, I mean, we blame the teachers
hmm
when students commit suicide as a result of bullying. You hear about all of the incidents that happened in school.
hmm
When I say we, I mean society. Society
hmm
likes to look at everybody that was around the person, when everything is warm and hot and everybody is still grieving and crying, if the
hmm
person is successful.
hmm
But it is very easy to
Right.
hide self harm. It is very easy to hide suicide attempts. If somebody really and truly wants to kill themselves,
hmm
it isn't the
hmm
people that are around them that can stop them from doing it.
Right, right, right.
It
And there certainly are signs, and I think that it's important to, I have a good friend, Jackie, who always says, check on someone. And so, I think that it is important to check on the people that are closest to us, but if someone doesn't want you to know,
right,
you're not going to know.
right. So if there's anybody that's feeling any type of guilt because of the person that you cared about that was harmed or was self-inflicting harm,
hmm
you can't carry that guilt because there's nothing that you could have done to prevent
Right,
that.
right.
So
Yeah.
go Bisons.
Yes.
We graduate from Howard,
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
from Howard we go where?
So after I left Howard, again, that was around the time that I had started to realize, this life is just not, it's not working, and a lot of this pain is self-inflicted. And granted, when I was a teenager, I want to say it was Paul who said, when I was a child, I spake as a child. And so when I was a teenager, it made sense that a lot of the things I wasn't really able to connect to my childhood. But as I started to get older, I realized that, I'm in control of my happy. I'm in control of the people I allow into my life. I'm in control of the experience that I have in this life. And so there were several years after that of kind of unhealthy relationships, learning to rebuild things with my mom, because we went several years without speaking. We didn't really speak the whole time I was in college, actually. And so as I went through that process and really learned to love myself, which became my priority, that's when things kind of started to change. I already, I was no longer hurting myself, but I think that I was in unhealthy relationships that were doing the hurting for me. And so, a few years into that, I just realized that, you know, again, I'm the one causing this. Before someone else was causing my pain, but I'm the one causing this now. And so I learned how to make self-love a priority.
By continuing to live in it and accept it, and
Mhm.
by continuing to have it as your comfort zone.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we get comfortable in that
Yeah.
chaos, and we know how to navigate chaos, but then when someone brings peace to us, it's like, hold on, something's wrong. I'm waiting for the shoe to drop, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, it's too quiet in here, okay?
Mhm. Mhm. And so, for me, it really was just a matter of getting sick and tired of being sick and tired. And a lot of times I will work with coaching clients and who just aren't ready, which is why I do an initial consultation. I don't accept everyone as a client, because until you are ready, there's no amount of outside help that can help you.
Mhm.
It has to come from within.
Inside, yes.
Hmm.
Tell me how we came to the name of Rising Phoenix.
Hmm. I always have seen my life story as kind of that of the Phoenix. There have been many times in my life that I felt I was burning, and felt that it was over. Many times that I really just wanted to quit. And one thing that I love about the story of the Phoenix is that death is a choice, that the Phoenix chooses to become, to burn and go into the ashes so that it can be reborn. And so for me, looking back over my life and all of the instances when I kind of thought I was out for the count, and then something within said, you know what, girl, we still got some fight. Um,
So, the Phoenix is a bird.
uh, hmm
Okay.
Yeah, so the phoenix is a mythological bird. I want to say it's from Greek mythology. And so it has like a 2,000-year lifespan. And at the end of its lifespan, it chooses to die in the flames, and then it is reborn and it gives its offering of its ashes into the sun city. And so why that's symbolic for me again is all of the times that I have, had to choose to be reborn, and now being able to go back and use those ashes of my past, those ashes of my pain, to be able to give to an offering for other women who are going through similar circumstances.
Yeah. That's deep, Benir. That's really deep.
Thank
Looking back, is there any one particular technique or affirmation that helped you the most, or that gave you the biggest return?
Honestly, it wasn't particularly a technique. I think if anything, it's just learning to be present and mindful. A lot of times, especially when we are feeling depressed, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, and so I'm a firm advocate that if you do have medical things going on, you need to seek professional help. Because it's just like if you have cancer, not everything can be prayed away. Not everything is as simple as you saying a positive affirmation. Yes, you can say, I am healed all day, but God also gave us doctors who can help you expedite that healing, you know. But I think for me, it was learning to be present, learning to observe my thoughts and my feelings and emotions without judging myself for them. A lot of times when we are in that depressed state, we make it worse simply by judging the fact that we're depressed in the first place. And so I really had to learn to say, you know what? Check in with myself, say, this is how I'm feeling today, and this is what I'm going to do for myself, as opposed to, oh God, here I am again. I thought I was over this. I thought, how am I helping women and I'm feeling like this? No, I'm feeling a little low energy and I'm feeling kind of sad. Maybe I should go for a walk. That'll make me feel better. And so kind of just changing that internal language so that it isn't coming from a place. And a lot of times when we're hearing that all of our life, hearing how we're so bad and, oh, you're doing this, you're wrong, being able to just
There you
say,
go again. Look at what you done
uh-huh,
got yourself in. You
uh-huh,
gonna be just like your
mm-hmm,
daddy.
exactly. Exactly. And so being able to say, you know what, this is what it is. I don't want it to be this way, so here's what I can do so that it isn't this way.
For that sister right now that knows she has an issue, but it is such a stigmatism in the community, career wise. What would you say to her if she says, I know I need to be ready, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not ready? Maybe when I retire, or maybe after I raise the kids, or maybe after I get a college degree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would you say to her to try and let her know ready is now?
Right. Honestly, for me, I had to change my reality and I had to change what I saw. And so for me, it became a matter of, even though I wasn't ready to get the help, I started surrounding myself by women that I admired. I started surrounding myself with strong women. I started listening to messages of hope. Because as long as we keep telling ourselves that same story with that same ending that keeps us defeated, we're going to stay in that place. And so, even if you aren't ready to reach out to someone and get help, clean out your Facebook timeline. So many of us spend so much time on Facebook, and it's
Girl.
funny to me when people when people complain about, oh, Facebook is just drama, Facebook is blah blah blah. You choose that.
Mm-hmm.
You choose that reality.
Mm-hmm.
So start with cleaning out your Facebook. Get rid of, and it doesn't mean that you have to cut off people, even though I will cut off people in a second.
In a
But
heartbeat.
right.
and,
But if you
a,
don't want
and,
to
a,
do
and a
that,
clean
then
cut too, girl. We're
right,
not back and forth. Clean
right,
cut.
no. But even if you're not ready to do that, start following pages that encourage you. Start adding friends who encourage you, because you're going to see it so much in your timeline. It's naturally going to bring you up, and it's going to be easy to get rid of the things that don't serve you. A lot of times I tell people, we spend so much time trying to push out the negative when all we have to do is invite more positive. So even if that is something as simple as being on a diet, instead of trying to stop eating pizza, eat more salad. You're not going to have as much room for pizza. And so, same thing with negative people. Just surround yourself with more positive interactions. You're going to be able to easily recognize when that negative person brings you down. So that's how I would start. And I think, after a while, after seeing these people thriving in your life, it will help you realize that you can have exactly that, especially if you're around authentic people. People who not only show you the testimony, but can also go back and tell you about the tests that helped bring them to this place. I think once that becomes your reality and what you see, it's going to be easy to cut out anything that doesn't make you feel like that.
So, where can we find the excellent coach of Benir Pierre?
I am on Facebook, Rising Phoenix Abuse Recovery Coaching. on Twitter at A Rising Phoenix. Of course, Periscope, even though I'm not on there as much as I would like to be, at A Rising Phoenix. And then, of course, you can always visit my website, www.risingphoenixcoaching.com.
Do you